Hey guys, what's up? I'm Erin and welcome back to the channel. Since the start of the year, our economy has had a pretty rough go of things. We're experiencing inflation at levels higher than we have in the past 40 years, and that's dominating headlines. And as the Fed attempts to battle this inflation, a vast number of concerns have washed over the nation. How long will inflation last? Is it going to drive us into a recession? Are we already in a recession? If you use the most technical definition, 2 sequential quarters of contracting GDP, then yes. But if you're waiting on an announcement from the NBER or the National Bureau of Economic Research, the ones that actually declare a recession, well, we don't have an answer yet. What if inflation doesn't get under control? Will we face stagflation, where inflation continues at high levels, but unemployment also continues to rise? Or will we eventually face deflation? I've actually done a video on each of these topics, and none of them are the best outcome for the economy. As the Fed attempts to drive down inflation, their goal is to keep the economy strong. So the goal is to bring inflationary pressures down, keep unemployment levels low, and keep demand strong within the nation, albeit not as strong as it presently is. And up until this point, the Fed has held out a pretty optimistic view that they would be able to execute all of this and nail a soft landing. But recently, the Fed has hinted that they're giving up their hopes for a soft landing and instead getting ready to engineer a growth recession. And I just have to ask, were you optimistic that the Fed was going to be able to engineer a soft landing, bringing down inflation, keeping the economy strong, and avoiding a recession altogether? I'm an optimistic person, but I didn't really think a soft landing was gonna happen. After all, we've only ever had one soft landing in our nation's entire history. So it's kind of a rare event. So if we're now heading for a growth recession, we probably wanna know, what is a growth recession? This plan will hopefully help cool our hot inflation, which currently sits at 8.5%, but it will bring some pain to the average American. The pain will likely come in the form of layoffs, slower wage growth, and a higher cost of borrowing. It's easy to see why this can hurt Americans, because with the cost of everything around us, homes, cars, food, utilities increasing at a rate faster than we've seen in decades, throw in the threat of job loss, and that makes everything harder. Even if we have slowing wage growth, that just doubles down on the pain of inflation. Even if the number on your paycheck is increasing, it's likely not increasing as much as inflation is. And it's well known that about 2/3 of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. So this really means that the affordability of everyday life will become that much harder. And the higher cost of borrowing is certainly an issue. The average home mortgage is currently $500 a month more than it was a year ago. Just for fun, I ran the numbers on my personal home. Now, we bought our home last year and we locked in a pretty low rate because rates were at an all-time low. Our rate is 3.1%, so it's pretty darn good. But if I were looking in the market today for a home exactly the same price but at today's rate, I wouldn't be able to buy it, or I wouldn't let myself buy it. Granted, I did buy our home keeping in mind what our take-home pay is and chose the affordability based on that, but mentally, I didn't want to have a mortgage that was over $2,000. Our mortgage sits a little under $1,500. If we would have bought the exact same house with today's interest rates, our payments would be over $2,100. That's over $600 a month more. That's over $7,000 over the course of a year. There are so many more things that I would like to be doing with this money that I now can do because I don't have to pay that higher payment. Like I could max out a Roth and then some. I could take a couple vacations. There are so many other things I would rather do with that money than pay a higher interest rate to the bank. The higher the cost of borrowing, the bigger the impact it has on your budget, and the less life options you have, the less options you have to save, to invest, to do anything fun, really. And the bigger the cost of debt, the bigger the drag on consumers. Consumers will have to have a bigger burden of debt, or go for cheaper options, or simply forego taking on debt at this time. And that's really one of the primary goals of increasing interest rates, to help cool off demand. But a cooling economy has some unfortunate side effects. But as Jerome Powell put it, these unfortunate side effects are more preferable because failing to take action would mean far greater pain. So as for that growth recession, it describes a period of a slow-growing economy combined with higher unemployment. And perhaps you might be thinking, that sounds kind of like stagflation, but fortunately it is a better situation because stagflation is a situation of slow economic growth, high unemployment, and high inflation. The hope is that the Fed can stamp out high inflation and tip us into a mild recession, thereby guiding us through a period of a growth recession, thereby sidestepping stagflation. Stagflation is more concerning because prices all around you continue to increase at an accelerated rate, all while wages, employment, and the economy as a whole suffer. But if we can rein in high inflation, a mild recession wouldn't be so bad. But that's not to say that a growth recession would leave everyone unscathed. Namely, we can expect changes in the job market. Reducing inflation is likely to require a sustained period of below-trend growth. There will very likely be some softening of labor market conditions. Our job market is sort of out of whack right now. Reportedly, there are 2 open positions for every available worker in the US, and it seems like practically every industry has openings that they are scrambling to fill. Currently, unemployment is near record low levels, sitting at roughly 3.7%. However, as interest rates continue to rise, many companies may start to look for ways to cut costs because rising interest rates increase the cost of business operations. So we're likely to see less help wanted signs and hiring freezes in many industries. And that is exactly what the Fed is hoping will happen. If they can help to cool off the labor market, this will lead to less people with discretionary money. Less discretionary money leads to less consumer spending in the economy. And if we can have less consumer spending, we will have less demand, which our high demand is what is keeping our incessant inflation so high. Combine that with the higher costs of borrowing, meaning many consumers will opt to not borrow or borrow less money, and this will help to reduce the flow of money in our economy. There is some concern that if this process is taken too far, unemployment levels could be driven starkly higher. Thus far this year, the Fed has increased interest rates 4 times and expect that trend to continue until inflation gets under control. Powell recently said, "I can assure you that my colleagues and I are strongly committed to this and we will keep at it until the job is done." So basically, assume the Fed will do everything they can within their power to get that inflation rate back down to that target of 2%. But there is some concern that if interest rates are pushed too high, it could push our country into a deeper recession, like what happened in the 80s. But Powell has said that they won't have to go as far as the previous committees did, and thus they won't have the same deep recessionary consequences. Ultimately, only time will tell. We do have mild signs that a growth recession has already started, and for these signs, we have to turn to our labor market. And yes, as I stated before, we do have an incredibly robust labor market right now, but there are signs that it is starting to slow. In August, the US economy added roughly 315,000 jobs. And while that may sound like an awful lot of jobs, in July, just 1 month prior, the economy added 526,000 jobs. So month to month, less jobs are being added, the first sign of a slowing workforce. Also, our labor force participation rate, those people actively looking for work, is slightly increasing. In July, participation sat at 62.1%, and in August, it rose to 62.4%. And while those may seem like minute differences, in a nation with over 330 million people, that difference represents almost 1 million more people looking for work. Labor force participation rates have been on the decline for many years due to our aging population, but they sharply fell amid the pandemic. And even 2.5 years later, we still have more than 3.3 million people who have not returned to the workforce. But we have some early signs that some of these people are looking to step off the sidelines and rejoin the workforce. But as the Fed increases interest rates in an attempt to quell inflation, the hot job market of today could easily give way to a cooler job market, one with higher unemployment and where simply jobs just aren't as plentiful. There's no doubt that inflation is hurting many Americans. Rising costs are making budgets run even tighter, but many middle-class Americans are reporting that they already have little to no wiggle room in their budgets. That's what it means to live paycheck to paycheck. Persistent inflation is bad for everyone, so the Fed will continue to increase interest rates to fight it. But in the short term, middle America can expect pain. Pain in the form of rising unemployment and slower than average growth, but hopefully lessening inflation. I feel like I've said this all year at this point, but I do think we're heading for a recession. I'm optimistic that it will be mild in nature, and perhaps a growth recession is just that. A mild recession, because we have an economy that has strengths in some areas and some hardships in others. But it's been a rocky year and it's not done yet. What do you think's gonna happen? Leave it in the comments down below. I post new videos every single week. If you got anything at all out of this one, please give it a like. If you're new here, please consider subscribing, or if you know of someone who might get something out of this type of content, please consider sharing. I hope you have a great day. I'll see you soon. Bye. The channel, I don't know. Oh, inflation, battles this inflation. Unfast, oh, freaking A. Can't even get started today. Them are the best. Slower and a higher, cars, food, seen in decades. Keeping pace within. So this is going to make, currently our home with the in mind, Jerome Powell put it, stagflation. Reined in. That was so close. Continue to increase. But oh my God. Concerned that if concerned that if middle America, bad for everyone. I don't know. Robust labor to increase rent, increase employment and purchase and looking. But as the Fed, oh my gosh.